3 years ago, and every once in a while I sort of feel the presence, but I don't know whether that's just because you want it.
40 years ago, they said he was too old. Now, at 94, Clint Eastwood continues to make films and is seeing a woman who is half his age. At 5 o'clock a.m., the crazy daily regimen begins with an exercise that would kill most. He is 30 years old, flies his own helicopter, despises birthday celebrations, and just purchased a second multi-million-dollar property because it was attractive. At 94 years old, Hollywood's toughest cowboy isn't just getting by, he's enjoying a life that even his own children find it unbelievable. "Oh my God, I don't want to break your neck because I'm heavy, but you'd best not be, and you're welcome to visit my office at any moment." It wasn't intended for Clint Eastwood to become a legend. In fact, everything about his early years indicated that he wasn't born into poverty, contrary to popular belief that he was born on May 31st. In 1930, nurses referred to him as Samson, his family, since he weighed more than 11 pounds. Lived comfortably in a posh area in Piedmont, California, and had 2 automobiles. His mother was able to track down their country club membership and swimming pool. Clint didn't have an easy journey despite having a family history dating back to the Mayflower. And a large portion of his later developed tough blue-collar attitude wasn't entirely accurate, rather, it was a component of the image he produced. He struggled in school as a child to make ends meet in Hollywood, failing junior high, and teachers at Oakland Technical High noticed anything and had to redo a grade. Unique in him, particularly on stage, but Clint disregarded their counsel because he was eager. His academic records indicated that he was more interested in females and vehicles than in some of his buddies. Even believed he never graduated, although there was one who preferred fixing engines over doing homework. His ability to play the piano like a pro was something that suggested he had an artistic side. He learned difficult parts that most teenagers wouldn't bother with that same day, practicing till his fingers hurt. After high school, focus would enable him to compose music for his own films. Clint took on some fairly crazy jobs at school before pursuing acting. In Oregon, he was taming wild logs, a task where a single mistake may be fatal. He earned extra money after being enlisted into the Army and stationed at Fort Ord. He even broke up a knife fight one night while working as a lifeguard and a bouncer, but his really pivotal moment occurred in 1951 when he boarded a Navy plane that went. He had to swim more than 2 miles after the crash near Point Reyes. Across icy shark-infested water, which he thereafter dubbed Stark Terror. Years later, when he starred in Escape From, that event stayed with him. He used the same time in Alcatraz to create the feeling of a cold water escape. Actually, his acting career didn't get off to a great start. In 1955, he was cast in he had a small part in the low-budget monster film Revenge of the Creature. Jennings, an anxious lab technician, lost a rat in his most memorable incident. The filmmaker was not afraid to show that Clint only got 28 lines since he detested the sequence. And it required 15 tries to get it right. He received $75 every week, and Universal almost cut the scene completely, and no one on the set knew that this uncomfortable guy was fumbling. Would go on to become one of the biggest stars in movie history while wearing a lab coat. Regardless of their delusions or how well-meaning they may be, I have my veto pen ready and prepared for any tax hike that Congress may even consider proposing, and I have a single message for the tax hikers: go ahead and brighten my day. After only 18 months, Universal Pictures terminated his contract in the mid-1950s. Believed he wasn't suitable for the film, and the explanations were nearly absurd. Adam had a chipped tooth, his speech was too slow, and his apple was too large. Wouldn't fix as they stood. Burt Reynolds was also fired at the same time. Reynolds made a joke in the Universal parking lot, saying, "You're really screwed because I can learn to pretend that you can't lose Adam's apple." Eastwood, years later, would go back to the same studio, but this time as a millionaire superstar. Dollar payout, the location that had previously rejected him now obliged to accept him. Returned as a leading man, and then came the turning point. Clint was once seen by CBS while speaking with an NBC story editor. In the studio cafeteria, executive Robert Spars observed how tall and catching his eye, which sparked a meeting, a screen test, and ultimately a major part in the Western series Rawhide. It was purely coincidental to be in the right spot, facing the right direction, at the right time. All of a sudden the man who had been turned down for his good appearance and easygoing demeanor were being praised for those same reasons. Producers were referring to him as a budding star when his face appeared in TV Guide. His sluggish speech and rough demeanor, which led to his dismissal, were suddenly drawing millions of people each week, yet Eastwood disliked the character because he believed Rowdy was too young, but he went along with it, and in just 3 weeks, what began as a backup gig made him a household name. The show's premiere broke into the top 20 TV ratings, however behind the scenes it was working long hours 6 days a week in the sweltering Arizona heat. His income decreased from episodes ranged from $750 to an astounding $119,000 when the show concluded. Some people still believed that he was a lazy director who planned their day. One person even said that he never included Clint in the opening scene since he was late. Because he promised to arrive by the 6th at least 30 minutes late. After a year of Rawhide, Eastwood was bored and wanted to try something new. Something new, at which point an odd chance presented itself to him from an unidentified Sergio, an Italian filmmaker, is producing a low-budget western in Spain. Since no one in the United States had an American name, Leone was using a false one, Bob Robertson. Eastwood wasn't even Leon's first pick because the States took Italian westerns seriously. He had attempted to acquire more well-known actors like James Coburn and Henry Fonda, but none of Clint finally consented to undertake it when they fit the budget, believing it to be such a tiny movie that would go unnoticed in America. But if it didn't work, he took the he didn't speak Italian, and Leon didn't speak English, but they utilized hand signs when they flew to Spain. Interpreters and a great deal of speculation to make that film. A fistful of Clint Eastwood became a global celebrity thanks to dollars, but it wasn't merely Eastwood's acting was particularly noteworthy because he devised the entire character's appearance himself. The clothing wasn't manufactured by he put it together using his own belongings and purchased a large studio wardrobe team. Repurposed boots and belts from Rawhide, picked up a hat from a store, then bleached and roughed up a pair of black Levi's second-hand store. Even the tiny cigars and poncho were purchased from unrelated stores he discovered while traveling. Eastwood intentionally created the aura of the nameless man because he wanted him to remain silent and communicate primarily through his body language. Made the figure appear more strong and enigmatic, despite the fact that his name shifted from film to film. Joe Mango Blondie viewers simply viewed him as the company promoted the same silent gunslinger as a trilogy, and the picture when these movies eventually came out in the US, critics detested them. Were vocal about it as well. One person referred to the first as a cheap jack, while another stated the one New York Times review criticized the good, the bad, and the second was dumb. Eastwood's acting was criticized by Disaster Time magazine, which claimed he looked like a piece of wood, but the audience ultimately decided that the trilogy made more than $84 million globally on a budget of roughly $2 million for just one film. The Good, the Bad and the Ugly generated over 44 million tickets and about $39 million in revenue. These spaghetti westerns were popular and sparked a wave of similar films were finally reviewed by critics, but not before Eastwood had. Clint Eastwood not only become a Hollywood legend but also altered the course of events. Assumed that position against his will and never let it go. His path to success took a significant change in 1971 when he assumed Detective Harry Callahan's post, and unbelievably, though, that position was never intended for Dirty Harry. Was presented to Frank Sinatra, who spent months working on it before leaving. Paul Newman didn't like the politics, but he didn't simply decline. Instead, he handed the screenplay, indicating it might be a good fit, straight to Eastwood, while others bailed to John Wayne. Robert Mitchum considered Sinatra's Leftovers to be trash, and Steve McQueen declined as he had previously portrayed a police officer in Bullet. One of Hollywood's biggest. Eastwood took a chance and moved ahead as the stars retreated. Owned production business and employed his own director, yet the movie wasn't a box office success. Burst, and then in 1978, Eastwood did something that nobody had anticipated. In the comedy Every Which Way But Loose, a truck driver and his pet battle on the street. Everyone believed that Clyde, an orangutan, would have his career destroyed, but this was the tough person from Dirty Harry, but Eastwood was now watching a monkey. Didn't care, he thought it was true. The film received negative reviews from critics, but viewers adored it. It became his biggest hit even more and earned over $100 million. Surprisingly, the sequel brought in an additional $70 million, over $1 billion by today's standards, but there was a sinister tinge to the jokes. After stealing, the orangutan's trainer allegedly beat him to death. Donuts on set, a horrifying conclusion to one of Hollywood's most bizarre triumphs. Eastwood has already taken risks in stories like those in He was filming The Eiger Sanction, a film about a dangerous mountain, in 1975. A climber in the crew was murdered by falling boulders while filming on the north face of the Eiger Mountains. Eastwood, the director and star, almost stopped the movie, but instead, he shocked everyone by deciding to take all the risky. He performed his own stunts by scaling rocks, hanging from ledges, and filming without the kind of. At 44 years old, he put his life in danger for the safety equipment we would expect today. Film, and it wasn't even his first near-death experience. Years before, he had survived it during his service days. He later stated if a jet crashed into shark-infested waters, if he had been aware of the sharks, he most likely would have perished from terror alone. Eastwood's self-confidence also prevented him from pursuing inappropriate jobs, such as Superman in the late 1970s. Superman answered, "That's not for me," but he rejected it completely. James Bond would have been the first American to play if he had agreed. 0007, but he was more aware of his brand and realized that Eastwood wasn't the man in. By the end of the day, he was the man with the pistol and squint, whether he was wearing tights or a tux. Clint Eastwood was more than just a star in this decade, he was a driving force for the camera as well. He had full control over his own production firm, the Mal Paso firm. Argue that he wasn't merely picking his roles for his films, he was molding them. If the writing didn't feel right, he modified it from the beginning. If the studio, even though many made fun of him for appearing in a movie, he persisted in pushing further. He made it work and made a fortune by making a joke about a monkey. Clint Eastwood had been after years of acting. He stopped performing by other regulations that people followed in order to gain complete control over what transpired in both in front of and behind the camera. So when I took over as his director, Play Misty, he went all in for his debut, leaving most first-time directors without a backup plan or second thoughts. Get sucked up by studio intrigues, go over budget, and arrive late. Eastwood did on the other hand, he filmed the whole film in his birthplace of Carmel by the Sea, utilizing actual instead than using elaborate sets. He completed the film early and under budget at places like a neighborhood cafe and radio station. Even if the music was performed on his $50,000 budget. The first time I ever saw Roberta Flack's, he personally obtained the rights to the song Your Face for just $2,000, and it became a success. The movie established Eastwood's filmmaking career and earned over $10 million. With a bang, but that wasn't only chance. In 1967, Eastwood was already considering the long term. He and his family are fed up with the strict Hollywood system. Mal Paso Productions was founded by an advisor and was more than just a business. Mal Paso is a tribute to the agency who cautioned Eastwood that doing so was a poor idea. Instead of helping him, spaghetti westerns would destroy him. Make enough cash to purchase hundreds of acres close to Mal Paso Creek and construct a. By the time he produced Han Gum High, his debut feature under Mal, he had established a creative empire. Paso was producing the film in addition to acting in it, and when it in 1968, Clint Eastwood broke opening weekend records and ceased to be the TV personality. He was a powerful force from raw hadid, but what truly distinguished Eastwood was how while other filmmakers spent days honing a single scene, he worked on the set. Became renowned for completing it in 1 or 2 tries without shouting, causing havoc, or making noise. Focus, he thought that the actor's initial takes frequently felt the most genuine and lively. Swiftly realized that you would not have another shot if you didn't arrive prepared. Jeff Daniels once remarked, "You have it's only one take, so you have to be prepared." Matt Damon had to plead for a second take, but this approach was effective in assisting Eastwood in directing actors such as Gene and Hilary Swank. Clint Eastwood's Oscar-winning performances were already Hackman's a Hollywood icon by the early 1990s, but his subsequent actions would propel him into The Cut Killings, a Western storyline that wasn't quite a studio production, was the first in the whole new league. Francis Ford Coppola even tried it in the 1980s and was keen to pick it up. Still couldn't make it, but Eastwood purchased the rights after noticing something in it. And waited for years because he wanted to become a real role model when he shot it as Unforgiven at age 62. The time couldn't have been more perfect. Better yet, despite having a modest budget, the movie made $159 million and won large at the Oscars. It was a final sign of respect, not simply another film. Clint Eastwood took care to pay tribute to his former gurus Don Siegel and Sergio Leone in the credits. The gunslinger had just graduated as a filmmaker. He gambled again 10 years later, and Million Dollar Baby was the kind of movie that he was looking for. That gave studios anxiety because it dealt with the grim topic of assisted suicide. Big risk. Warner Brothers hardly gave it a proper release, but Eastwood went ahead. Initially probably anticipating it to fail, yet the movie succeeded, making over after winning the Oscars with $216 million. Eastwood was no longer just a respected filmmaker, he was unstoppable, demonstrating that he could handle difficult and painful subjects and still move audiences. People stopped doubting his intuition. The previous year, he had already caused a stir in the business with Mystic River, a film that hit childhood like a slow burn. A murder case that seemed too real, traumatized lives, and Eastwood kept everything as calm and concentrated. There is no dazzling camera work, just a cast and unadulterated feeling. Tim Robbins and Sean Penn took home the Oscars for that. Finally, critics could express aloud what they already believed Eastwood possessed. Become one of the most emotionally astute filmmakers in existence, and then came grand. Nobody anticipated that Eastwood, who is almost 80 years old, would produce one of his greatest hits, yet he told the tale of a sour, prejudiced war veteran who becomes slightly softer to defend his once hated neighbors. Somehow touched the character's ideal emotional chord. Was harsh, sour, and strangely recognizable, almost like a worn-out version of each part that Eastwood had previously performed, and viewers adored it. The film earned $270 million and continues to be one of his favorite moments from his late career. Even critics noted how his mere presence elevated the movie like Dirty Harry's ghost beneath. The secret to all of these achievements was an approach that was different from any other. Eastwood didn't yell for action on set, didn't practice non-stop, and didn't believe in. He spoke quietly, trusting his instincts, and he gave it his best shot. Actors, and it usually succeeded. Tom Hanks once made a joke about Eastwood back in the day, shouting on a Western set could frighten his performers, so he handled them like horses.